So today's topic is field parameters, and I think field parameters are super awesome. They're one of my features of Power BI, and I wanted to just give a brief overview of what they are if you're unfamiliar with them. They're essentially a tool that lets you dynamically change the elements of your Power BI report. And when you use these, you can essentially consolidate lots and lots of pages of your Power BI report into one or two. It really just helps save space. So you can do things like change the measure that's shown in your visual, flip them back and forth. You can set different colors for your different measures so that your users get a visual indication of something being different when they click the button. You can change the dimensions of it, so you can have it flip by category, subcategory. That one's a little bit not exciting because the subcategories are so small, but you get the idea. And you can also use it to flip between different date dimensions. So if you have, say, your sales measured by calendar year and fiscal year, and you want people to be able to flip between the two, you can do that. So that combination of things I feel like is really powerful, and it's pretty cool. So here we're using, I'm going to go through how to do this entire thing from start to finish, but I just want to demonstrate one thing about the field parameters when you use them with small multiples. This is true for small multiples in general, not just with field parameters, but what happens is when you use, if I go with, I think it was this one by subcategory, if you go with some of these things and you can't see a trend line for specific things because your the shared axis on the small multiples basically makes it so if you have one category that's a lot larger than your other categories, you can't see that trend as easily. You can actually turn that on and off in the visual settings. There's a setting for shared axis, and what you can do is flip between the two. So if you use bookmarks, you can let your viewers flip between the shared axis settings. So if I go to this one, I can turn it on and off with a bookmark. And I think I had one that was a little bit more, maybe I didn't, maybe it was sales amount. Here we go, this is a better example. So when you turn it on and off here, you can see that turning the shared axis off lets you see the trend better, but then you can't compare the sizes of the buckets as easily. So being able to flip back and forth between the two is pretty useful. So we're going to go through how to do that. And then one more thing is, so field parameters let you assign additional columns to the field parameter table. And what you can do with that is you can add whatever you want to your field parameters. So in this case, we also have definitions. So when I hover on this, it gives me a definition of the measure that's shown in the chart. And when I change it, that changes. So you can have it in a tooltip, you can have it in a text box. So down here, it's doing the same thing when I flip between the two. We'll do that. And then I have one more tab here that's basically the same thing, but in a matrix visual. So you can use these field parameters with matrices too. When you select multiple of these, it goes a little nuts, but you can add more, you can drill up, drill down, you can take these out, you can switch it between fiscal year and calendar year, that kind of thing. So, all right. Were there any questions before I start the how-to part of this?
And you guys, I want to encourage you all, feel free, folks, to chime in, come off mute, um, and let us know if you have any questions or type them in the chat. I'll be happy to raise them too. Neil says, so many questions.
Let me type. All right, so I'm going to go and delete my existing field parameters before I start so that I don't get confused, because what happens is I start typing in things and then they autocomplete and then I can't find what I'm
No
trying to
worries.
do.
Pranam did say that he notices you haven't yet switched to the new visualizations layout.
Yeah, you mean the on visual thing with the, yeah, I know what you mean. I forget what it's called. I actually turned it off for this presentation because I'm not super familiar with it, and you'll see me like clicking through like to get the thing to pop up, and it's yeah, on object. That's what it's called. Yeah. I tried it out. It takes a while to get used to, and I'm not used to it yet. So I figured missing the number of things that I could screw up in this presentation would be a good idea. All right, so we're going to create our field parameters first. And to do that, it's just under the modeling tab here. So modeling, new parameter, and fields. And I'm going to create one of these per bucket, I guess. So I'm going to do one for measures, one for dimensions, and then one for our date. And I like to put parameter, things short like that in front of these because then they sort together in the data section. I'm going to call this PBIUG measure. I guess we're not the PBIUG anymore. But that's okay. I'm going to call it that anyway. And I'm just going to search for my measures here. So sale amount and quantity. And just as an FYI, you can rename these in here when you're creating it after, like, you usually can, I should say. You actually can't right now, so watch what happens when I try and rename this. When I take off something and hit enter, it drops one of the measures from this window. I think this is a bug. I'm not sure when this started happening, but it's super obnoxious. So we need to rename them somewhere else. I'll show you that later. Just so you know you're crazy if you go in there and try and do it. You can also rearrange these when you're creating it if you're lucky when you're clicking and dragging. There you go. You can also change later in the DAX end, but I'm just going to create. And we're going to do the same thing for our dimensions. So modeling, new parameter, fields. I'm going to do sales territory, category. And by the way, this data set is the Microsoft AdventureWorks database. They publish it online somewhere. You can download it. You can install a free version of SQL Server and import it into there. Pretty useful to play around with. I added a couple of years to the dates in the tables that I'm using so that it wouldn't look like it's made in 2017, but because they don't update it very frequently.
Speaking of updates, Shalika did ask, what version are you using for Power BI? I'm gonna guess if it's our environment, it's probably the newest update.
Yeah, it's the June update because I want to try out the new card visual. It's this one with the lightning bolt
Yeah.
here. Yeah, I don't know if everybody's heard about that, by the way. There's a new card visual that lets you do like icons. Actually looks nice. That lets you align your text. I say this like it's a novel concept, being able to align your text right or left or center in the card visual, but it it is a novel concept for Power BI. So definitely get the June update if you haven't yet. I think is it preview in the preview settings to turn it on in the preview settings. I can't remember.
I
All
think
right, so
based
we
on the number
created.
of heart reactions, people are pretty excited about the update.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. Miguel Myers kind of spearheaded that. He's the visuals program manager. He's awesome. He actually presented at this user group
He
some
did.
number of months ago. Yeah.
At the end of 2022, did an amazing chat about, no surprise, data visualizations.
Yeah. He's got a hashtag on LinkedIn, by the way, that's hashtag PBI core visuals. If you search for that, you can submit feedback about the core visuals, things you want changed, and he responds to single one of those. It's cool because you can bypass the Microsoft community where you have to like vote on the people's ideas for visuals. It lets you kind of like skip the line. All right, so we're just gonna do bar chart in here, and we're gonna drop the parameters we just created in here. And the funny thing is with this, you have to select something in these measures, otherwise it's gonna try and add everything to your visual, and you usually don't want that. Because when you have nothing selected, Power BI want everything selected. So we're going to put our measures in the Y and our dimensions on the X. So here's what we have so far, and I'm going to switch these to single select because I don't want to be using multi-select. You can do this for multiple visuals at a time if you hold shift and then change the settings. So single select on. So now if I go through these, it's swapping out things in our visual. And what we can do is we can move our dimension to small multiples and then drop a date in here. I'm just going to start with month maybe, and then we're going to make another field parameter. Oh, I'm getting confused because I'm in the wrong, am I in the wrong chat thing? I'm in the wrong chat thing. Wait, no.
Don't worry. So there's
I
always
don't know.
the
I don't see
chat's
the
always
question. Oh,
pretty active. If there's a question, don't worry, I'll catch you up.
all right, cool. I keep hearing the pings. It's like maybe I should turn the
Oh,
pings off. Isn't that
they're
like the
going off.
first thing everybody does with Teams is turn the pings off because they drive you nuts? All right, so we moved this to the small multiples. I'm going to change this to 3 by 3 instead of 2 by 2 so we can fit more in here. And let me swap this to one with more values. And I really wouldn't do data labels on in here because they're kind of, oh, I can't turn it off. That's super cool. All right, well, let's deselect and reselect. Can I turn the data labels off? No, it really wants the data labels to be on. I don't know why. That's cool. All right. So, the do one more measure here for our, sorry, one more field parameter. I'm going to make our date one. I just wanted to show you that essentially you don't have to use field parameters with everything. You can put your normal date dimension in the x-axis if you want to. We're going to go crazy here and do them for everything because this is a demonstration. But I feel like more than 2 is kind of overkill in normal use. Month and year, fiscal year, and this one is calendar year, but it's not called that. All right, and let's make that one single select too. And put it in here. Pick month out. All right, so now when we flip between these, it's switching. And what you do for the colors is if I go into the visual settings, and then I just select my chart, that would help. The columns, if I change this for one of the measures, it sticks. So when I flip, oh my gosh, it's not doing it. Maybe it only works with a line chart. Let's try it. This is like one of those moments. Okay, so if I set the line, is it going to stick? Lines, colors. Yeah, okay, that's weird. So the color sticks in the line chart, but not the bar chart, apparently. That's interesting. Didn't expect that. All right, so we're going to do I'm going to rename these actually because we need a little more of a descriptive title. So the slicer by default is going to show this header as the title. You can just double click rename these. You can say measure this by dot dot dot. And then this one you can say like and dot dot dot. So I like to kind of give them friendly titles. Helps not scare people away quite so much when you have people that are overwhelmed easily, if you know what I mean. All right, so our definitions. So for the definitions, what you can do, I'm going to go to the data view here. And the field parameters make a calculated table. So these are the field parameters that we created. You can see the number column here is the sort order. So if you ever need to change the order that they appear in the slicer, you can just edit these numbers. And you can actually make these negative. You don't have to stick with like 0 through 100. You can they don't have to be sequential either. So you can have one be like -5 and one be 25 and one be 30. And this is only relevant because when you start adding like 20 of these to a list and then you start adding and removing things, the numbers get all uh, out of sorts. And so, because you end up wanting to add things to the bottom or add things in between two, and then you can't because the numbers are, um, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you're like, I want to add one between these two, and then you have to change all the rest of the numbers. So yeah, it gets a little complicated, but you can edit these to whatever you want, and you can go below 0 if you need to. So what we're going to do is we are going to just after the 0 here, we're just going to add another comma and then put in our definition. So you can say this is the sum of line quantity on sales orders. And we need to do that for both of these. If you add to one of these lines, you got to do the same thing for all of them. Otherwise, you get an error. And if you don't have a definition for one of these to add, you can just do 2 quotes, and that counts as just blank. But you got to put something there. So I'd call this sum of amount on sales orders. Okay. When I check the box, it creates a column on our table, and the title here is something that you can rename. So we're just going to double click this and call it definition. And you can add as many things as you want in here. So something that people will do is they'll add like a category. What you can do with this is in your slicer, if you drag that category to the top of the slicer hierarchy, it makes a collapsible section in your slicer. And then when you check that, it selects all of the things under it. So we're using single select, so that's not really useful to us. I'll put it in here anyways, just so you can see. I'll call this like, this category can be sales. And I'll show you what this looks like on the matrix page later. Just gonna add it while we're in here. All right, so now we can add our icon. And our icon is just under the buttons menu here. They've got an information icon, and it's kind of gigantic by default. Kind of got to size it down a little bit, and then the thickness is way too high. So if you scroll down here to icon and change the weight to like 1 or 2, it usually looks a little better. And for the action on here, we need to add a measure for this, but I'm just going to show you where this is. So we turn action on, so that's going to let you do a tooltip. And you have to select an action in this drop-down menu, and your options here, like none of these are just do tooltip. So what I like to do is just select web URL and then leave it blank. You can leave web URL blank and then it won't actually click anything when you enter it. So the tooltip, this FX button, is going to be where we put our measure. So I'm going to make one for that. So I have a measures table up here that I put all my measures in just to organize them a little bit. I'm going to call this definition. And because we're using single select here, I can just do like min and then select our definition. And that's just going to get basically the minimum value in definition, which is only ever going to be one thing. Brian Grant is here today, so maybe Brian Grant has a better version of the DAX we should be using here, but I'm keeping it simple today. So
But
now if we
Brian,
go, what?
oh, sorry, I was going to say, but Brian, feel free to post it in the chat.
Yes, yes. Okay. I get nervous when I start talking about DAX in front of
And
Brian.
he says, you nailed it, Christine.
All right. So if you have a tooltip chart through the tooltip, oh, so the slicer is only affecting the current page. So if you try and use the report page slicer, or not slicer, tooltip, sorry, It's not going to, what you select in this field parameter is not going to filter the stuff on the other page. Although, now that I think about it, because you've got it selected in the slicer, it's going to use the context of that in the visual, and that'll probably work. Should try it and let us know. Chart axis options depending on the measure chosen in the main chart. I don't know the answer to that. You should try it and let us know what you find out. All right, so what are we doing? We're setting our tooltip, so we need our definition here. All right. So I did that kind of fast. Basically, I just typed in the name of the measure we just created and selected it in that menu. And now when we hover on this, it gives us the definition. And you can do pretty much this exact same thing with text boxes. So when you type into a text box, you can say the definition of, I'm going to make one more measure here for this. So I'm going to make a measure that gives us the text for the selected measure in our slicer. So I'm going to call this selected measure equals. Yes, it's going to go on the YouTube channel. Tina can tell you all about that. Selected measure is going to be this, yeah, the same thing essentially. So min, and we're just going to use the, from our field parameter table, there's that column in there that had the measure name. If I start typing param, let's see, looks like I forgot to rename that category column that we added. So this one, I think it's this one. I guess we'll find out. So this is just that, I think it was the first column in the table. You just type in the name of that there and it's going to get whatever one you have selected. So in this text box, there's this option to plus value, add a value. And what this does is it lets you select things from your data set to put into the text box. And what you do here is you type in the name of your measure. So we're going to do selected measure. If you wait a second, sometimes you have to wait a really, really long time for it to pop up. I say this like it is really, really long time. There it goes. So this is our one here. We're looking for the one that matches the measure name exactly. So I click on that and it underlines, and that means it's working. And then we can give it a name here. And click on save. So that put in the measure name that we have selected. So you see how it's changing when I change the. And these text boxes are a little bit buggy once you've inserted measures, like you can't see the blinky cursor anymore. If you just start typing, it's still there. So, oops, I need to put a space in here. And then we're going to add in our other measure, which was, what do you call it, definition. There it is. That one was faster for no particular reason. Did I spell it wrong? Did I spell it wrong over here? I'm going to make this a different title so that it's longer. I think it's getting confused. Wow, it's very unhappy now. Taking where that means it's working.
All right. Is there a way to edit these dynamic values? ML found when I rename something, I have to redo the whole box.
Which dynamic values are you talking about? The ones in over here or the ones in here? Kind of all dynamic, so I'm not sure which one you mean. These ones you can rename in the DAX for the parameter. So in here, you just edit this text.
Yes, ML says the one in the box.
The text box. These ones that they're going to show whatever your measure is spitting out. So if you want to change the text that's coming out of these, you can just change your measure. This one is going to be whatever's selected up here. So if you change the name of this in your field parameter, it's going to change. Like we could change one of them, I guess, as an example. Change this to just quantity. That updated there. What you can do with these is you can actually put your numeric measures in here too. So you can say the top 2 products in the last fiscal year were X and Y. You get that out of write a measure for that. I have a video on how to do that in my YouTube channel if you're interested. You can also say like sales went up 30% last year and have it do like a little up arrow, down arrow, or different colors depending, that kind of thing. So you can make some really cool dynamic text boxes, I guess is what I'm getting at. But this session is more about field parameters, so we're going to try and stay focused. So we've got our definition down here, our definition up here, and our next thing we were going to do was the shared access toggle. So this one you can do, I'm going to give myself a little space here, is you essentially just duplicate this table and have a bookmark that shows and hides the 2 different versions of the same visual. So I'm just going to do Control-C-V to copy paste and put them right on top of each other. And what we do is we just go into the axis settings, and on one of them we turn the shared axis off. So this is under the y-axis. We're going to turn that off and then turn scale to fit on. So you'll see that looks different now. And I'm going to change this to one where it's more obvious that I know when it's working. Okay, this one's got scale to fit on, shared axis off. Now we're going to create a bookmark. So I'm going to go to the view menu up here and selection and bookmarks. I'm going to turn both of those on because we need both of them to set up our bookmark. So I'm going to add a bookmark here. And this bookmark we are going to rename to off. And I like to call this something super short and simple because the bookmark buttons, when you add the Bookmark Navigator, they use whatever your bookmark name is. And if you're trying to make kind of small, not super in your face buttons, you have to have kind of short button text to do that. But you could make this a longer example if you wanted to. So I'm going to call this off, and I'm going to hide which one I have it. Okay, so this one is shared axis off. So this is the right one. I get confused and I have 2 of these showing. So we want to use this one and we want to hide the other one. So you see I have 2 versions of the same visual here, 1 and 2. And I don't rename these because I don't know if this was like a one-time fluke and I'm just paranoid now, but when you rename these things, it changes the title of your visual. And once you change the title of your visual, you can't get this dynamic title back because this title was updating when I selected different field parameters. And that's something where if you go in and manually enter the title, like you can't get that dynamic title back easily. You have to basically like create your own or just make a new visual to get that turned back on. You can, by the way, create your own DAX measure to set these titles and use the selected information, make it customized and fancy, but it's kind of a bit of a time sink, at least for me. So, all right, so we have that one hidden. So I'm going to update this bookmark, and I'm going to change this to not update the data and not update the current page. That'll make it so that if our user has different things selected, different filters and whatnot, it's not going to reset it on them. It's just going to show and hide the visuals. And I'm going to update this. And then we are going to hide the one we just created and show the other one. And this one is got the shared axis on, meaning the axis is the same for all of the small multiples. And so we're going to add a new bookmark. We'll call this on. And same thing, so we're going to uncheck data, uncheck current page. And then we are going to update this bookmark. And now we're going to add a group for these bookmarks. This is for the Bookmark Navigator. If you've got lots of bookmarks in your report, the Bookmark Navigator needs something to filter on so that it's not showing all bookmarks in your entire report. So we're just going to group this and then stick them in here. I'm going to rename this to shared access. I think you can use selected value with field parameters. Not sure why you wouldn't be able to. Maybe Brian knows the answer to that. There's the thumbs up from Brian. Yay. All right, so we're going to insert and we're going to go to buttons, navigator, bookmark navigator. And you can see this has a bunch of other bookmarks in it because I did this as an example and didn't delete the previous one. So we're going to set in the bookmark settings. Under bookmarks, it'll let you select which one we are using, which is the one called shared access that we just created. Now, if let me make that way smaller. So you have to hold Control when you're in Power BI Desktop to select these things. And when we flip between these, it's showing and hiding the visuals. All right. So we're going to do the matrix visual next. I'm going to duplicate this page, and then I'm going to delete a bunch of this stuff. Oops. That. Rename this to matrix. And I'm just going to change this visual type to the matrix. And we need to move these around a little bit. So what we want is we want our dimensions to be in the rows and our date to be in the column and our measures to be in the values. And that'll give this typical look for the matrix. And I like the style preset minimal. So I always switch it to minimal, just personal preference. I don't think that I want to use month with this matrix because what it does is it expands it way out and you get this big long scroll bar. So what I'm going to do is you can put a filter on this slicer to filter out which field parameters are available. So if you go in here and we're looking for the one that has the same title here, it's not super descriptive since we renamed it for our viewers. Just select the two you want to keep or select all, select the one you want to remove, that kind of thing. So now we just have, this is still selected because it was selected when I set it. So when I set it to here, it'll disappear. All right. So we can change these to select multiple now if we want to, because in the matrix, it kind of makes more sense to do that. So I'm just going to go to, where was it? Slicer settings, single select off. And the use case for these field parameters with tables specifically and matrices is particularly when you have a database table with like 100-something columns on it, and people say that they want to be able to get to that information, and you don't want to either put 100 columns worth of data in a table to let them export it, or B, change the table or make different versions of the table for every person who wants different combinations of things. You can make them a field parameter that has all of the dimensions, all of the measures, and they can select what they want and export it if you allow exporting. If you use a table, it exports to Excel really nicely. I'd also recommend, if you've got a whole bunch of these, to turn on the search. So there's a search in the slicer settings. We don't really need it here because we only have 3, but you can turn on search, and that way they can start typing and the things they want will pop up and they can select multiple. And this works with conditional formatting. So actually, let me select a couple of these, expand it down. If I go to the cell elements here, it'll let you set conditional formatting for whatever in the table, and then it'll stick when you select and deselect it here. So if I want to add, oops, back over here under cell elements, I'm going to do maybe for sales amount, I'm going to do data bars. Maybe change that to a lighter color. And then for, oops, close that. For the quantity, maybe I want that to be on color because we don't want to be too crazy. We've got too many data bars, then nobody can see what's going on. So we're going to make this one be dark purple and gray. All right, so this is kind of a ridiculous looking table, but you get the point. You can add conditional formatting for these, and when I deselect and reselect them, it's still there. I kind of didn't expect this to work when I first started doing this. Like I expected to lose the conditional formatting, but it does stick when you do that. So let's see, what else am I missing? Filter. Oh, so the order that these things, where's my category in here? Oh yeah, okay. All right, so the order that things expand down into is the order that you select them in the slicer, which sounds kind of weird, but like for example, if I do category and subcategory and then expand it down, we have our subcategories under our categories, which is what we want. If you do it in the opposite order and just have, if you say select subcategory and then category, it'll do the opposite. So it'll put your subcategory first and your category underneath. So um, you usually don't want that. To work around that, what you could do if you're trying to use matrices like this is just create two field parameters, one for like the big groupings, the big buckets, and one for the small buckets. Um, and maybe turn on single select if you're really wanting to kind of give guardrails to people's experience. And that way they select one big thing, one big bucket, one little bucket, and they can't screw it up. Cascading Slicers technique. Oh yeah, you're right. Thanks for reminding me. So that value 5 that we could before, I'm going to rename this category, which was our sales bucket. If you just drag that into the top of here, that'll create a grouping. So if we had multiple categories, we'd have multiple drop downs here, but it kind of cascades them down. So when I select sales, it selects everything under that. In this case, we don't have anything else, so it's not a super interesting demonstration, but get the idea. And another thing to just keep in mind, if you're using a lot of complex measures and you have a whole bunch of columns, if you deselect everything in the slicer or do a select all, um, it, the table visual freaks out a lot. It won't load pretty much. So it's not a perfect user experience, but it's still cool. So. All right. So I have a link to this file in GitHub. I'm going to paste it in the chat so you can download it and look at it if you want to. And there. And does anybody have any field parameter cool and tricks to share other than this? I'm hoping somebody does because I want to hear all your cool tricks.
Don't be shy.
She's a hard act to follow.
Oh, I had another kind of semi-interesting thing. So you'll notice that these small multiple categories are alphabetical. Something that you tend to want to do when you're using small multiples is to sort by the size of the thing. So, like if you're doing sales amount by product, to have your top selling products be in the top left, And that works totally fine when you're not using field parameters, because you can sort the small multiples by your thing. When you start using these field parameters, when you switch between those things, it doesn't save your sort. And so it still tries to sort on the original thing that you don't have selected. So it doesn't work very well. I've got a tutorial on my YouTube channel that goes through how to work around that using bookmarks. So essentially what it does is it takes your measures parameter, and you make bookmarks on that, where each bookmark, you have one bookmark per measure. Bookmark has it sorted in the bookmark settings, and then you use a hidden slicer to set the field parameter in the background. I'm not going to do it in a live demo because it's super fiddly and I know I'll screw it up, but I do have a video on it, so check that out.
AJ, my go-to feature is calculated groups because it can reduce number of measures. It is not as straightforward as field parameters, but saves and performs better in Power BI models.
Yeah, I have been meaning to use more of those, but the previous organization I worked for, that wasn't software that was approved, so I haven't spent a lot of time with it.
Can field parameters choices be applied to multiple visuals in the same page?
Totally. So you can have multiple visuals. You just drop field parameters into each visual, and then it'll apply to everything on the page. I know Kerbal has some really good field parameter tricks. She's got a YouTube channel, Curbal. All right, Tina, I'm going to pass it back to you.
All right. Well, I'll come on camera because if that's the end of Christine's session, that means we all owe her a round of applause, everybody. So please come on camera, come off mute, and round of applause.